Hello friends, a very good day to you. I hope you are enjoying our classes and let us proceed forward with another of our classes. Today we will be talking about the Councils Act of 1909. And the Councils Act of 1909, of course, most of us know, it is also referred to as the Morley-Minto Reform Act. And the Morley-Minto Reform Act is named after the two important co-sponsors of this Councils Act of 1909, the Secretary of State for India, John Morley, and then we have got Lord Minto as the Viceroy of India. Okay, so let us proceed and see what kind of reforms the 1909 Act brings into effect. Okay, but before we do that, we should also know the background, and the background to the 1909 Act is the Swadeshi movement. Okay, and then of course the rise of extremism within Congress. Okay, now the rise of extremism and the Swadeshi movement as it unfolded, it had got the British establishment quite worried, and in order to drive a wedge between the extremists and the moderates, this kind of a reform act, okay, reform act which enlarges the role of the councils, which is the Imperial Legislative Council and also the provincial councils, is very important. Okay, and therefore the British thought of this reform as important, and therefore it was instituted. Okay, because of the background of the Swadeshi movement and the rise of extremism, and because of the need that the British felt in order to divide the Congress itself and the members of the Congress by providing them some kind of a conciliatory measure. Okay, and therefore bringing into their own fold the moderate sections of the Congress. However, we should also know that the Councils Act, which was passed in 1892, had already enlarged the roles of the council and had already enlarged the membership in the council. But this act, you see, it further enlarges upon those two areas, and the two areas that this act touches upon is all the constitutional area. By constitutional, we mean the constitution of the councils. Constitution, we mean the membership of the council. Okay, we are not talking about a written constitution or anything of that sort. We are talking about the constitution of how it is going to be constituted or how many members are going to be there, and also it touches upon the functional aspect. That is the function of the legislatures, okay, and the additional members that will be inducted into the councils, their functions. Okay, now before we proceed, we should also understand the fact that the councils are in the form of executive and legislative. Okay, this is the formation, this is the composition of the Governor General's Executive Council, that there will be an executive and there will be a legislative element to it, but together they are taken as together. Okay, executive and legislature, they are not separate. These are the both councils, they are together in the form of the Imperial Legislative Council or the Governor General's Council. Okay, and the Governor General takes care of the executive part, and through this act he will also be responsible for the legislative part. Okay, and now we can finally proceed into the various provisions of the act. As far as the provisions of the act are concerned, number one, enlargement. What is being enlarged? Of course, the size of these assemblies, the additional members. And remember, the additional members are the members of the legislative. Additional members are not members of the executive. Okay, they have nothing to do with the executive. Okay, so the size of the additional members will be enlarged, and this is enlarged in the central executive. This is enlarged from 16 to 60. Okay, the number of additional members in the legislative council, okay, in the central council will be enlarged from 16 to 60. And also we have to know that the provincial councils also saw such enlargement. So the councils of Bengal, Bombay, Madras, okay, then we have got the United Provinces, which is present day UP or Uttar Pradesh, but previously it was known as the United Provinces. They all saw enlargement of the councils. Okay, and the numbers were 50 each. Okay, 50 additional members. And the councils of Burma, Assam and Punjab saw an enlargement of, you see, 30 each. Now additional members in Burma, Assam and Punjab will be 30. Bengal, Bombay, Madras and United Provinces will have 50 each, and the central legislative will of course have 60 members. Okay, so this is the size of the enlargement. However, we have to understand the fact that out here, okay, out here official majority was reduced. Okay, previously official majority was paramount within the central legislature. However, now the number of officials, British Indian officials within the central executive or central legislative will be reduced to a significant number. However, we see that official majority will be retained in the central legislature. Okay, so out here we have official majority, and in the other provinces official majority is done away with. Okay, non-official majority. In the other provinces there will be non-official majority. Okay, however, we should also understand that the legislatures are constituted in such a way that there is also a provision for you see nominated non-officials. So non-officials who are nominated into the office, okay, non-officials who are nominated within the legislature, and with the inclusion of the nominated non-official, okay, we see that the actual elected representatives will always be in a minority. Okay, they can never become a majority, because even the non-official nominated non-officials will always play in the tune of the British. Okay, so along with the ex officio members, the ex officio members are of course those members who are part of the executive, okay, governor's executive or governor general's executive. So along with the ex officio members, the official members, nominated non-official members, okay, all three of them together, they can always overpower the elected or the non-officials, completely non-official members. Okay, they can always overpower the elected or the completely non-official members. So this is something which is very important to remember about the Councils Act of 1909 or the Parliamentary Reform Acts. Okay, and proceeding forward, let us look at the schematics for representation. As far as representation is concerned, some kind of representative principle, okay, was also put in place, and this was in the form of you see sending representatives by registered you see organizations or registered associations such as landholders associations, municipalities, then we have got universities. Okay, these are interest groups which have their own specific interests, okay, and they send their own members to the various councils, all right, provincial as well as the central. Okay, so these were allowed to return their own representatives. Apart from that, the very important fact about Parliamentary reforms is the acceptance of the communal principle. Okay, communal principle. Now, what is the communal principle? Communal principle is a principle which follows the diktat that various religious communities will have their different political you see interest. Okay, so a religious proclivity of a person will also dictate his political proclivity, and in order to give voice to this political aspiration of a religious community, there shall also have to be a religious representation, okay, political representation of religious communities. I hope you are following it. Political representation of religious communities, which comes from the communal principle, the principle being that religious communities have their political interests also, okay, and therefore the need for political representation of religious communities, and this comes in the form of separate electorates. Separate electorates, okay, whereby the Muslims were given separate representation. Okay, So, this is briefly the constitutional aspect of the Morley-Minto Reform Act. Okay, how the membership within the councils will be constituted. Apart from that, apart from the legislative aspect, we also have to understand that even the executive. Okay, even in the executive, certain Indian members were inducted to the executive. Okay, and this is very important. The first law member within the executive, first Indian law member, okay, within the executive is Lord Sinha. Okay, Lord Sinha. So, this is the name that you have to remember. Okay, the first law member within the Governor General's executive. Okay, so these are the constitutional aspect of the Morley-Minto Reform Act. Now we will look into the functional aspect. Okay, now let us look into the functional aspects. Okay, what will be the functions of these legislative assemblies? Now, if we look at the functions of the legislative assemblies, we see that they can now discuss the budget. Okay, they can also pass resolutions on the budget, and apart from that, all right, discussing the budget and passing resolutions on the budget, they can also, you see, make questions. Okay, they can ask questions to the executive, all right, to the executive branch, and they can ask supplementary questions. Now remember, asking questions to the executive is a very important function of a legislative, okay, as far as the parliamentary system is concerned. And all the Morley-Minto Act is doing is trying to imbibe a sense of parliamentary functionism, okay, within the Indian councils, that the Indian councils will run accordingly as the the British Parliament runs. Some kind of parliamentary you see procedures are imbibed within the Indian councils, and the asking of questions is a part and parcel of the parliamentary procedures. Okay, and apart from asking the question, suppose you ask a question to the executive and the executive refuses to answer that question, they were given the right, the legislative was given the right of asking a supplementary question. Okay, asking supplementary questions to the executive. Of course, the executive retains the right of answering or not answering these questions. Okay, now remember that these discussions that they are doing, these resolutions that they are passing, or these questions that they are asking, it is all unilateral. There is no binding agreement between the legislative and the executive that they should function together. Okay, the executive might take their you see resolutions seriously, they might take their suggestions seriously, they might not take their suggestions seriously. Okay, so as far as we see that there is no hard and fast rule that these resolutions will carry forward to executive action. Okay, so executive action is not bound upon these resolutions. Okay, apart from the budget, they were also allowed to discuss various you see problems of importance to the Indian problems. Okay, as far Indian by Indian problems, what I mean to say, I am paraphrasing in a very generalized way, not just Indian problems, you see, of Indian importance, issues of Indian importance or local importance. Okay, issues of provincial importance. Okay, the very important aspects of state, such as the finances, such as the army, such as you see the foreign affairs, all of these are, you see, all of these are at the hands of the Governor General and the various governors. Okay, but the legislature can of course discuss things of Indian importance and things of issues of local importance. Okay, so these are the functions. However, we have discussed the functions, but we should also know that veto is retained by the Governor General. So, any act or any law that is passed by these legislatures or that has come into effect in the various councils can of course be vetoed by the Governor General. Okay, the Governor General is the supreme authority, and the responsibility of the Governor General is not to his councils, is not to the imperial legislature, is not to the executive. Okay, responsibility of the Governor General is to the British Parliament. Okay, he is responsible to the British Parliament for the administration of India, and he is responsible to the British Parliament through the office of the Secretary of State for India. Okay, to the Secretary of State for India. So the Governor General responds to the Secretary of State for India, and the Secretary of State for India is the go-between the Governor General and the British Parliament. He is not responsible to the councils in any way. So this is the structure because of which the Morley Minto Act is also referred to as constitutional autocracy. A constitutionalized autocracy. Constitutionally, a parliamentary system is put in place. Okay, various provisions are made for representation, various provisions and functions are also made so that the legislatures could at least discuss things of importance, but at the same time, autocracy of the Governor General and the British Parliament, a foreign parliament within the land of India. Okay, that's why a constitutional autocracy. Apart from that, another significant criticism of the government of India, Councils Act of 1909 is the fact that it introduces the elective principle in a skewed manner. Okay, it is not talking about generalized franchisee. In fact, it talks about separate electorates. Separate electorates, okay, and communal representation. So we see that the most damning indictment of the Councils Act of 1909 is the fact that it was a constitutional autocracy, that these legislatures really did not have any kind of power, and also it brought into effect one of the most duplicitous principle which was introduced by the British in India, that is the communal representation, okay, which becomes a problem which the various acts which will come after 1909, they are unable to solve. The 1919 Act, 1935 Act, all of these acts are unable to solve the problem of communal representation, because once the dice has been rolled and once the die has been cast, that from now on the religious communities will have their separate political interests. Once that principle is accepted, okay, there is no moving back. This is not what I am saying. Of course, this is what Bipin Chandra says, and I wholeheartedly endorse Bipin Chandra's argument about communalism and the growth of communalism in a political form in India. Okay, so this is in essence the Councils Act of 1909, and I hope that you have understood the various facets of the Councils Act of 1909. I hope that you enjoy it. Okay, I hope you will be studying hard. Thank you.